SportAI.
What's good, everyone? It's Nati with another video for the channel. Welcome back to the DMVSportsZone channel. I'm here with Noah again, and as we do every single week, we give you guys a weekly fantasy football preview. And as you can tell, I'm in a different surrounding right now. I'm back in Chicago, so this should be another fun video with none other than Noah. And I guess just to get started, we haven't really done this before, but I feel like it's a good thing to do. Let's have like a sort of mini recap of our week 3 picks, and can you give me one pick that you definitely got right, and then one pick that you got wrong from last week?
Yeah, so I think our biggest win was, James Robinson, the call from week 2. We talked about him in week 1 as well. He's slowly become a top 3 PPR fantasy running back now. Even when they're down, as you saw by the Dolphins, usually you want to go more to the pass now, her running back, but now with James Robinson had 7 targets in that blowout loss with 2 touchdowns, and there's no slowing him down. He's a very versatile back. I think he's like the undrafted story for this year, and doesn't come around that often. So I think he's very similar to how Doug Baldwin kind of surprised everyone coming into Seattle as an undersized, undrafted player. So
they got Leonard Fournette. I mean, that means something.
Yeah, exactly. He's got the talent, but they had faith in him. And the funny, craziest part was he wasn't getting as many reps until some of the injuries, COVID-related injuries, actually, to the Jacksonville Jaguars. So it was an unlikely story. I think that's why he was a huge sleeper. Obviously, no one drafted him. And people thought maybe it would be Chris Thompson to break out, maybe it would be someone else once injuries happened, but it was James Robinson. So that's our big win. And our big loss, I think, so far has been this past week, Ryan Tannehill. We were still pretty high on him.
Yeah.
As well as Carson Wentz. Both of them had everything lined up, not only analytically, but just statistically as well, to do well. But that just now comes into question. That's why Carson Wentz is in the hot seat. You don't have 2 interceptions a game and 6 interceptions on the season without having some criticism. And surprisingly didn't turn around, so that was our big disappointment or loss from the past week. But I think Tannehill will bounce back. It's very typical. They can't just be going off forever. Even Lamar and Patrick has their rough games. So
yeah, I totally agree. And well, that's the system, right? That's SportAI, and they're usually right. So it's very rare for them to miss. But yeah, I totally understand. I was high on Ryan Tannehill as well, so definitely a dud there. I would say the pick that I got right was Austin Eckler as a fantasy stud last weekend. Despite the Chargers losing against the Panthers, Eckler did have a great fantasy performance, and I think he had around 140 yards, 11 catches, and a touchdown on the ground. So that's about 25, 26, at least half PPR points, just to get that happy balance there. Joshua Kelly wasn't really thrown into the mix as much, and sucks for me because I had no choice but to start him because I had no running backs outside of David Johnson, and Christian McCaffrey was down. Obviously, he's on the IR right now. So Joshua Kelly couldn't pick up anybody on the waiver wire, so that was a bad week there. But yeah, I mean, Eckler is getting pretty much a lot of the touches, and I see him being at least low-end running back run for the foreseeable future. The pick I definitely got wrong was Dallas Goedert, tight end for the Eagles. It's the fantasy sleeper. Yeah. But I'll largely blame that one on injury, right? Because he did go down with the ankle injury. But I'll admit it, even before that, I think he only had a catch for 7 yards. So wasn't too involved. He was a sleeper for a reason, but I still got that one wrong. So it is what it is. But moving on to this week, because we got a whole slate of exciting fantasy matchups. Can you give me one fantasy sleeper that will break out week 4?
Yeah, so for our sleeper this week, we want to focus on a position that's pretty underrated, which is the tight end. And fantasy, it's a very shallow position in terms of depth. So anybody can break out, and it's going to help your team. So our sleepers this week are actually Eric Ebron of the New York Giants. Right now, everyone wants to avoid New York Giants offensive players like the
Yeah.
plague. Infamous offensive line, Saquon being out. They got Devontae Freeman in there. Golden Tate's not performing. Darius Slayton's not performing. Sterling, the entire offense,
Yeah.
except for Evan Ingram. Evan Ingram has actually been surprisingly consistent the past 3 games in terms of targets and catches, because they're not an offensive threat all the time. All the red zone touches count, and for Ingram, he's actually targeted 39% of all the red zone targets last week. So that's a very interesting metric that suggests that they're starting to more heavily lean on Ingram as they start to rebuild. And Jason Garrett loves his tight ends, so that's our big sleeper.
Okay. I kind of agree actually. I think Evan Ingram does get a lot of the targets, and even in that lackluster offense, I think he will thrive. So I definitely agree there. My fantasy sleeper this week is Devin Singletary, the running back for the Bills. In the win against the Rams last week, Singletary had 121 total yards and 4 catches. And Zach Moss is still ailing from a toe injury, so I think Singletary is a sneaky play this week, and he's also going up against a pretty lackluster Las Vegas Raiders rush defense that has given up the 3rd most fantasy points to all running backs this year. So I think he's getting a pretty sizable workload this week, and I think he'll continue to thrive while not being like, while not getting most of the carries while not getting all the carries, if possibly Moss, actually plays in the game, I think Singletary will still get a lot of the carries and will still do pretty well against that Raiders defense. So that's my fantasy sleeper this week. Now moving on a little bit to what we usually do every week. Can you give me 2 great fantasy plays this week, Noah?
Yeah, besides our sleeper, I think someone that's a little bit more on fantasy radars that is primed to have a throwback Thursday season is Eric Ebron of the Pittsburgh Steelers.
Okay.
Yeah, through our research, we always had Ebron and Ingram, and they have similar sounding names. So sorry for the confusion, but Eric Ebron is getting all the signs of being a breakout tight end. And when he was with the Colts a couple years ago, that when he had that Pro Bowl season and broke out, very similar to now. Ebron, people were worried with McDonald also there, and also on a pretty big contract, what they would do. But they're committed to a very short pass game with occasional deep throw. And Ingram is there for the vertical threat as well as being the bigger body of blocking. He got a lot bigger. The rumors are he's over almost 270 pounds, which even for a tight end is huge.
Yeah.
And he's becoming such a mismatch on the red zone. Great matchup this week. Eric Ebron, player to watch. The other player that we also want to watch, let's go running back, a little more traditional. We actually have Joe Mixon of the Cincinnati Bengals.
Okay. Started off slow. Okay.
Yeah. There are signs that, people are talking about Burrow trying to carry the team, but people forget a lot of his targets now are going to Mixon. Our line is not the best, so he's throwing a lot of short passes to him. And he's having very similar PER rating to David Johnson in 2017. Very similar player, a big back that also is an elite pass catcher. Mixon is only a matter of time before he blows up, and I think week 4 will be the weekend.
Okay. That's dang. Okay, Mixon is definitely someone who I was trying to trade for in one of my leagues, and I also agree with you. Mixon will get better, and I think he obviously is off to a slow start, but yeah, it's interesting that you picked him as a great fantasy play this week. My 2 fantasy plays are pretty much just chalk. I'm going with Alvin Kamara, the running back for the Saints, who had a monster game last week, and I'm going to start it this way. I think I told Noah this, but last year in 2 out of my 3 leagues, I had the number 1 overall pick. Everybody thought I was going to go with Saquon or maybe even McCaffrey as a unconventional pick. I went with Kamara because I was expecting that Kamara would be what he is this year, last year. So I'm a little pissed off that he's doing all this right now when he's not on my team, and I believe he's on your team actually in our league. So,
yes, absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, that definitely hurts me. But outside of that, Kamara is he's beasting this year, guys. He's arguably a top 3, if not higher, real life and fantasy back. He's just that good. Against an albeit porous Packers rush defense, Alvin Kamara did have 6 carries for 58 yards on the ground, as well as 13 catches for 139 yards and 2 touchdowns through the air last week. So slowly but surely, Kamara is actually reaching McCaffrey level in fantasy football. And I know he's doing all this without Michael Thomas. And when Michael Thomas comes back, he's going to get a lot of those targets. But at the same time, he's playing against a porous rush defense in Detroit as well. So he should feast this week. And I think while Michael Thomas might, again, eat away at his receptions, at least out of the backfield, and is a big reason why I'm not picking him as my fantasy MVP this week, I still think he's a great fantasy play and someone that, of course, I mean, everyone knows this by now, but someone you should definitely have in your lineup. And then with the second great fantasy play, again, just going chalk, Aaron Jones, the running back for the Packers.
Oh, okay.
Speaking of guys, running backs who are beasting this season, Aaron Jones is another one of them, and he's really, I think we've talked about this, Noah, but he's really pushing back against the narrative in the offseason that he's going to regress, he's not going to get as many touchdowns, not going to run for as many yards. He's really pushing back against that and just really just demolishing it, honestly. And he's on pace right now for 1,600 rushing yards and 20 rushing touchdowns alone after his blazing start. So that tells you all you need to know about Jones right now and how great of a play he is. He's playing against a terrible Falcons defense this week, which the Falcons as an organization, that's a whole different story for another day. But their defense itself is really bad. And I think even similar to Kamara, you know, the Packers are getting an elite wide receiver, I think, this week back in Davante Adams. Despite that, I just think Aaron Jones is just too good to not play and just fire him up as an elite running back one this week. But yeah, those are probably my 2 great plays this week. And then obviously on the flip side, Noah, can you give me 2 disappointing fantasy duds this week?
Yeah, so for our dud this week, we, interestingly enough, are really high on Joe Mixon, but unfortunately we're not as high on the other Joe and Joe Burrow. Joe Burrow is not particularly a highly rostered quarterback, but he's starting to get sleeper consideration. Some people are either going to roster him, or if they're really risky, they might start him. And I can confidently say not to do that. Joe Mixon can do well on the ground, but Joe Burrow faces a tough passing matchup, and is starting to get hurt. So the durability factor is being calculated in there and is a worrisome sign because they do have a very bad offensive line. And we saw with Saquon, durability isn't guaranteed, even if you're healthy or a traditionally not injury-prone player. When you have those kind of X factors, negative X factors in a bad offensive line, it's not going to add up well. So Joe Burrow, I think, disappointment this week.
And can you give me another disappointment?
Yeah, another disappointment is, I think, is going to be Davante Adams. That's a controversial statement. Controversial, of course. Our couple of major factors behind why he was ranked as a possibility for a disappointing week was he's not entirely healthy. Yeah, they're in a prolific offense right now, and Rodgers is red hot, but Davante Adams not completely healthy, and as an elite route runner, arguably top 3 route runner in the league, he relies a lot about his lateral quickness. So it's a huge risk to presume that he'll be back up to 100% in their matchup. With Aaron Jones proving that he can take on the workload when Adams is out, another not a good sign. We see other guys like Valdez-Scantling rising up there, Curtis Lazard. All 3 of them are getting tons of more targets. So I think in real life, Davante Adams will come back and do it fine, but in terms of fantasy, especially because he was the number 2, number 3 receiver taking off a lot of people's boards, I'll be super careful. Try to build around him. It's an interesting part where we predict a dud, but we don't think he downgrades him all the way to the bench. Maybe as a flex, but bring in reinforcements at that receiver position for this week.
Well, No disagreement there. Those are two great picks, although the second one is a little bit controversial, but I think the Packers offense is humming with or without Adams, so we shall see for sure this weekend.
No problem for Green Bay.
For sure. And the first fantasy dub that I have this week is someone you actually mentioned earlier as someone who you thought would be a sleeper last week, I believe, in Carson Wentz, the quarterback for the Eagles. Wentz, as we all know, has not been his usual self to start the season and is a big reason why the Eagles are 0-2-1 at this point. He did improve his play somewhat against the Bengals this past week. He was able to find the end zone on the ground even while not winning the game. But to date, right, to date for the season, he has just 737 yards, 3 touchdowns, and 6 picks, and a 63.9 passer rating. So he's just not doing really well right now, and his seat in Philadelphia is very hot right now, and Jalen Hurts is definitely on his tail. And this week he's playing against the 49ers defense that, while as we've seen throughout the last couple of weeks,
injuries.
Pretty riddled with injuries and stuff, it's still locking down opposing offenses that are just not great. And I feel like the Eagles count as one of those offenses. So I don't really project a great fantasy or even real life performance by Wentz this weekend on Sunday night against San Francisco. So that's definitely one of my duds. The other dud that I have is Hunter Henry, the tight end for the Los Angeles Chargers. The problem with Henry to start the season is, despite putting up good receiving numbers, right, when you look at yardage and catches, just hasn't been able to find the end zone for the Chargers, which has thus only allowed him to average about 9 half PPR points over the last 3 weeks. And that's just not cutting it if you want him to be your tight end 1 or maybe even high-end tight end 2. So I think it'll be even more difficult for him to do even 9 points a week against a pretty stout and underrated Buccaneers defense, which I know we've talked about in previous fantasy preview videos. So it's led by defensive coordinator Todd Bowles, and they're doing an absolutely fabulous job for the second year in a row. So I really don't see Hunter Henry having a great week for, unfortunately.
Yeah, no, that's a really interesting take. I think I agree with you on those points. I think Carson Wentz, the one thing I will disagree is that eventually will be a sleeper. He's going to turn around.
I agree.
Because his interceptions, a couple of them are pretty bad, but a lot of times there's miscommunication with receivers. As you know, there's a lot of changes. Nelson Aguilar is gone, but got a young guy. He's got rookies starting, so Alshon Jeffrey hasn't been 100%. So there's a very interesting factor there. We'll see where the Eagles go from there, though.
Sure. Definitely agree there. But with the last question, as usual, give me your fantasy MVP for Week 4, Noah.
Fantasy MVP? You already mentioned him, Alvin Kamara. No hesitation. He's our first-ranked player overall, let alone running back in fantasy.
Even with Michael Thomas coming back?
Even with Michael Thomas coming back. Because he's proven 2 things that are incredibly important in the real world that kind of went into the calculations as well. And one of them is that he's shown that he goes off even with reduced carries. If you saw last game, he actually was out-carried by Latavius Murray. Significantly. But on the ground, when he got the carries, it was a big gain, and he's a passing threat in the backfield. So when Michael Thomas, even if he comes back, will be someone that won't detract away from Kamara. Because you saw with Tre'Quan Smith, he got double-digit targets Week 3, and it didn't even matter. Kamara still went off. So he's an efficient player, and he's going to go off regardless of the defense he's facing, but he has a great matchup this week on top of that. So he's our fantasy MVP, Alvin Kamara.
That's fair. That's definitely fair. And as I mentioned earlier, that was someone who I was deliberating on, like, whether I should go with him or this person who I'm about to mention as the fantasy MVP. So I do worry a little bit about Michael Thomas and him eating away at the receptions, because I don't know, I'm just holding on to what happened last year against Kamara. And at the same time, I can definitely see Kamara being the MVP this week. I'm going to go with another running back who has an absolutely fantastic matchup. And I'll add in this caveat first. This is only if they actually play this weekend, because we've heard about the virus outbreak for the Titans and how the Vikings as well might be affected by it. So this is, again, with that caveat, if they play, I think Dalvin Cook can be the MVP this week.
Okay.
Let me say that again. I think Dalvin Cook would be the MVP this week. I talked about Alvin Kamara, talked about Aaron Jones, But
Okay.
Dalvin Cook could be added in as well as one of the fantasy
Mm.
running backs that have just been beasting these last couple of weeks. In the run-heavy scheme in Minnesota, he's been able to average about 21 half PPR points for the last 3 weeks,
Ooh.
despite repeatedly negative game scripts that have led the Vikings to an 0-3 start this season. This week, he plays against one of the worst rush defenses in the league in the Houston Texans. And unlike Kamara and Jones, doesn't really have to worry about an elite wide receiver coming back from injury and taking away even some of his touches, some of his catches out of the backfield. So
Okay.
I think Dalvin Cook is an elite play this week and is probably my projected fantasy MVP for week 4. And even if the outbreak, as we've seen, the two teams, I believe the Titans and Vikings, they've closed down all practice facilities and all that. Even if that has happened, I still think the Vikings, that might be a plus for Cook because I think they might actually lean more on the running game just because of the fact that like they haven't gotten much practice in this week. They won't get much practice in, so the passing game might actually suffer. But you can always carry a running game no matter where you go, no matter what the weather is, no matter what the circumstances are. So I still believe Cook is a great, absolutely great play this week for week 4.
Absolutely, I agree. I think that it goes to appreciation that we see a lot of the fantasy running backs are going down right now, obviously Saquon and Christian McCaffrey. But it just shows the renaissance of the run game in this league, how we can have Kamara and Cook, arguably 3 and 4, be practically invisible on draft boards priorities. Yet they can be easily fantasy MVPs for the week. So it shows the state of the league, the talent at the running back position. Because, I mean, we even have other guys like Gurley, David Johnson, guys that we think also do pretty well this weekend, but they just weren't projected as high as, the next level. So it shows definitely the depth of the running back position in the league.
Yeah, definitely agree there. And that's it for the question, guys. The overall analysis for this week, the overall projections. Noah, do you want to plug that oh so lovely platform that you have that everyone should keep an eye out for because it is really good, guys. Trust me, I am a testament to how good that oh so lovely platform is. So do you want to speak on it a little bit as always?
Yeah, definitely. Thanks. Thanks for the mad love for SportAI. SportAI is where I'm getting my data, and it's a mobile app platform integrated with artificial intelligence that's going to help optimize your lineups and help anyone understand fantasy sports analytics with a click of a button. All you got to do is just input your lineups, similar to how you want to see two players. You want to see Dalvin Cook and Kamara compared. You can just input their player profile and just click optimize for any league, any scoring type, and it will provide you the data. So it's good to bring that type of artificial intelligence analytics to fantasy sports, and I'm glad to talk about it here with Nati today for this past couple of weeks and for the rest of the season.
Yeah, for sure. And make sure you guys look out in the description for this video on our YouTube page where you can get the link to subscribe to the platform. And I, again, think it's really good. These videos are always great, first and foremost, because we get SportAI on here, but also because of the fact that we have two different perspectives, right? We have like the machine, the analytics side, and then we have just me, just an ordinary fan that just loves fantasy football, doesn't really have, too much backing or too much experience when it comes to like analytics or anything, but we can both talk and it just brings really good perspectives to these weekly videos. So Noah, as always, I appreciate you being on the video, on the channel. But that's it, guys. Thank you so much for watching. Please make sure to like, comment, subscribe to the channel. Greatly appreciated as we try to post fire content as much as possible on here, as well as our Instagram page, all lowercase DMVSportsZone, and our Twitter page at DMVSportsZone. So that being said, thank you guys again so much for watching, and have a great week. Have a great fantasy weekend coming up, and stay tuned for more videos. Peace.